Hello everyone, and welcome back to our look at former coaster locomotive number 2103 at the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum. In Part 1, we saw the locomotive in service on the museum's weekend excursion trains. In Part 2, we will learn all about the project to acquire the locomotive from San Diego's North County Transit District and bring it to the museum. Back when I visited the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum in May of this year, I had the opportunity to talk with Museum President Stephen Hager about both the organization and the project to acquire Locomotive 2103. In this video, we'll take a look at the museum and the task of saving the locomotive, as well as what the future might bring for both Coaster 2103 and the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum as a whole. If you have any further questions on any of the information provided in this video, you can visit the museum website at psrm.org to find out even more. I met Stephen in front of the museum's La Mesa, California location to talk a little bit about the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum.
My name is Stephen Hager, and I'm the president of the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum Association. I've been volunteering with the museum since 2010. I started out as a speeder operator, and then I worked my way up through brakeman, conductor, and locomotive engineer. At that point, I got into museum management. I started out as the secretary on the board of directors, and then just last year I became the president of the museum. The Pacific Southwest Railway Museum is a nonprofit organization that was established in 1961 in San Diego County. The organization's objectives are to preserve railroad history from the southwestern United States with an emphasis on the railroads of San Diego County. Over the years, the museum has done this by building up a collection of railroad equipment. We've got operating trains out at our main facility in Campo, California, where we operate demonstration trains for the public to ride. We have a large museum that we've collected and built up over the years to display all of our railroad equipment. We have one of the largest libraries for railroad collections and paperwork in this part of the country. We have a lot of the original paperwork that was developed as the San Diego and Arizona Railway was being surveyed and constructed, and then for much of its lifetime, both under private ownership and then under ownership of the Southern Pacific Railroad. The San Diego and Arizona Railway was the last transcontinental railroad built in the United States. It was envisioned and built by John D. Spreckels, who was a sugar tycoon and a local San Diego businessman. His goal was to connect San Diego to the eastern United States with a direct rail connection. And he ended up doing that by constructing a railroad that passes through Mexico from Tijuana through Tecate, where it crosses back into the United States, and then eastern San Diego County and Imperial County out to the Imperial Valley, where it connected to the Southern Pacific Sunset Route to continue east. So at our main facility at Campo, we have the restored 1916 Campo Depot. We run it entirely with our own volunteer crews as a gift shop and as a ticket office. That's where our excursion train rides depart from. We have a 45-minute round trip that we operate on Saturdays and Sundays, and when the train returns, people can tour through our museum.
Former coaster locomotive 2103 is the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum's newest acquisition. Stephen told me a little bit about the locomotive and its significance to San Diego County and the museum.
Coaster 2103 is one of 5 F40 PHM-2C locomotives that was owned by the North County Transit District and operated on the Coaster commuter train service from 1995 through 2021. As a San Diego County railroad, the Coaster service is probably one of the most relevant railroads to our mission. So when North County Transit District announced that they were going to be retiring the F40 locomotives, we knew that we had to save one of them. The reason we picked Coaster 2103 out of the 5 locomotives was that it was in the best shape both cosmetically and mechanically. The Coaster F40 locomotives are unique in that they were built specifically for the Coaster commuter service as commuter locomotives. They're different from the Amtrak F40 locomotives in that they have a separate head-end power engine to provide power to the passenger cars, so the main engine doesn't have to sit there howling away in full throttle to provide that electricity. For that reason, they're fairly unique locomotives. There aren't many other examples of that locomotive type that you can find around the country. So they have both a significance as a locomotive class, but also a regional significance to San Diego County. North County Transit District announced at the beginning of 2018 that they would be retiring the F40 locomotives. At that time, the museum board of directors decided that we wanted to pursue the preservation of one of the locomotives. And as the newly minted secretary of the organization, I was appointed project manager. The first thing that we did was we sent a letter to the North County Transit District expressing our interest in one of the locomotives. We also outlined an interest in acquiring some of the coaches down the road, although we knew at the time that they still have many years left before they're ready to be retired. The initial response that we got from NCTD was polite, but understandably they weren't particularly engaged in the process at the time. They'd never really done a donation like this before. They weren't really familiar with the process of donating such a large capital asset to any organization, for that matter. They also had just gotten notification that they'd received the Carl Moer grant to replace the locomotives with new Siemens Charger locomotives.
Before we continue on with the story, let's look briefly at the Carl Moer Grant and the California Air Resources Board. The Carl Moer Grant is a state of California program that is awarded by the state's Air Resources Board, known as CARB for short. This grant is given out by the state to various railroads operating in California to incentivize replacing older locomotives that do not meet current United States Environmental Protection Agency Tier 4 standards for diesel engine particle emissions. While specific requirements for the grant can vary slightly between the various regional air boards within the state, the main terms of the grant are pretty standard. A railroad receives money to purchase new Tier 4 locomotives on the condition that the old locomotives that are being replaced must be permanently retired and rendered inoperable. Older locomotives are only allowed to continue running if they are upgraded to EPA Tier 4 standards.
At the time, the grant specified that the locomotives being replaced, the F40s, had to be scrapped. So the initial barrier, of course, was NCTD's belief that they couldn't donate the locomotives because the only option for them was to scrap them. The first thing we did was to do some initial legwork. We reached out to the California Air Resources Board. They in turn directed us to contact the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District. There are more than 30 such districts around the state of California, and each of them administer CARB grants at a local level. The district worked with us to put together a proposal to CARB to modify the conditions on the grant, and it actually took nearly 2 years.
With much work, the museum was able to successfully convince CARB to modify the conditions of the grant to only require North County Transit District to disable both the main engine, or prime mover, and the smaller diesel generator for head-end power. This would allow the transit agency to donate the locomotives to the museum with the car bodies intact. NCTD was only required to cut large holes in the side of the diesel engine blocks with an acetylene torch rather than completely scrapping them. With the grant amended, North County Transit District was ready to proceed with the donation in early 2020. However, as a condition of donating the F40s, NCTD wanted the museum to take all 5 of the locomotives rather than just one. If the museum wanted to save one locomotive, they would need to take all 5 and remove them from NCTD property no later than April 15th of 2021. As Stephen described, the option of taking all 5 locomotives posed both benefits and challenges to the museum. Initial plans were to bring all 5 locomotives to the museum and select the best locomotive as a primary preservation and future restoration candidate. Options were open for the other 4 units, including keeping one as a backup parts supply and parting out and scrapping the other 3. Another option that was considered was to de-accession one of the other locomotives to another museum. However, the biggest challenge of all that lay ahead was figuring out how to get 5 commuter locomotives all the way out to Campo. To both the east and west of Campo, the museum has been cut off from the National Rail Network. The museum sits on the former San Diego and Arizona rail line, which once connected San Diego to the Southern Pacific Railroad just east of El Centro, California. Several bridges are now out of service pending inspections, and tunnels both to the east in the formidable Carrizo Gorge and to the west in Mexico have suffered serious collapses in recent years, which have yet to be repaired. Even reopening the line west of the museum to once again connect the rail line to San Diego by way of Mexico would take a considerable amount of time and money. As such, all new equipment coming to the museum for more than a decade has arrived by truck.
We knew it would be cost prohibitive to truck 5 locomotives to Campo. Those would be the longest and heaviest pieces of equipment we'd ever acquired, and there was just no way that we could pay to truck all 5. Our solution was to pursue 2 paths in parallel. Primarily, we would be trying to find a temporary location somewhere in San Diego County where we could store the locomotives while working in the background to raise funds to reopen the tunnel in Mexico. Obviously, working in Mexico has several challenges beyond just the financial side of things. When you're dealing with work in another country, you have to deal with the politics in that country, the track owner in that country, which in this case is an agency that is a subsidiary to the state of Baja California, Mexico. There were many logistical challenges to the tunnel project. The bigger challenge, of course, in the meantime, was to find a place we could store the locomotives in San Diego County.
With only a limited amount of time, the pressure was on to find a suitable storage location for the locomotives. The museum approached both BNSF Railway and the San Diego Imperial Valley Railway, as well as several private track owners, in hopes that a storage agreement could be reached. Ultimately, after a year of searching and 2 deadline extensions by NCTD to move the locomotives, no suitable location in San Diego County could be located. With progress on reopening the tunnel in Mexico still a long ways off and the final deadline to move the locomotives by April 15th of 2022 fast approaching, the museum was faced with having to come up with a quick solution come early 2022.
We had to quickly come up with a solution to get 1 locomotive to Campo while disposing of the other 4. Disposing is a bit of a harsh word, but that's the reality of the situation we were in. We had to find someone who would either buy the locomotives off of us or who would accept a donation of 1 or more of the locomotives.
The museum considered several different entities for the potential resale of the other 4 locomotives, including a number of locomotive scrappers and parts brokers. Eventually, 2 recipients were chosen. The first, a locomotive resale, scrap, and parts dealer based in Anaheim, California, by the name of Coast Rail Services Incorporated, received locomotives 2101, 2102, and 2104. In exchange, the museum was given some funding for the project and a temporary storage space at Coast Rail's yard in Anaheim for the other 2 locomotives while they continued to work out the logistics of moving the 2103 to Campo by a combination of rail and truck. A home was found for the 5th locomotive, number 2105, in early July of 2022, when the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum officially transferred ownership of the locomotive to the Southern California Railway Museum in Paris, California. In early April of 2022, all 5 locomotives were picked up by BNSF Railway from the Coaster's Stewart Mesa shop complex just north of Oceanside, and over the course of a few days, moved to Coast Rail Services in Anaheim.
All 5 of them stayed there for about 3 months. Then in July of 2022, it was time for Coaster 2103 to leave again. In that time period, we contracted with Contractors Cargo Company and North American Heavy Haul, who would truck the locomotive from National City to Campo. We also contracted with Bob's Crane, which is based out of Lakeside. They would provide the 275-ton and 350-ton cranes needed to lift the locomotive off the track onto the truck and vice versa. So in July, it went back to La Mirada, then Barstow, sat there for a couple weeks because of an error in the computer system that added a magical 50 tons to the locomotive. Once we got that fixed, the locomotive was on its way to San Diego. Then it went on a local down to National City. In early August, the locomotive was loaded up onto a couple of specialized heavy lift or heavy transport highway dollies, which would then be pulled by 2 semi-tractors. The next day, the locomotives embarked on a late night trip out to Campo, which ended up taking 2 nights. It took a circuitous route through National City, the east part of San Diego, into El Cajon, through Freeway 8 up to Alpine, and then finally on Buckman Springs Road out to Campo. It arrived in Campo on the morning of August 8th, and it was offloaded onto the tracks and brought into the museum facility on August 9th. Since then, we've been slowly working on getting a couple mechanical issues fixed on the locomotive. We did a test run on our Christmas trains back in December of 2022, and then in February of 2023, we did its official inaugural run where we invited the public out to ride behind it.
With 2103 now safely at the museum for everyone to enjoy, the museum has many plans for the locomotive both in the near term and the more distant future. Potentially restoring the locomotive to operation is also a future option, but it does pose some potential challenges.
Our future plans for the locomotive are primarily to get it cosmetically restored. The locomotive definitely served a hard life operating along the coast, and it suffered from a lot of corrosion in the car body as well as paint deterioration. So over time, we'd like to patch up all the holes in the car body, and eventually we'll give it a fresh coat of paint to get it looking good as new. We've also kept the door open to possibly operating it under its own power again. That's more of a legal question than a technical question. Because the locomotive has both of its engines disabled, it's not able to operate under its own power. However, it's still completely intact both electrically and pneumatically, so it's able to function as a non-powered control unit. By coupling it up to our operating GP9 locomotive, SP3873, we're able to lace up all of the electrical and pneumatic multiple unit connections, and Coaster 2103 is able to operate as a fully functional cab car. Because of the way the CARB grant was written, we're not supposed to operate the locomotive under its own power without repowering it to Tier 4 standards. There's plenty of cases we could make in the future to try to change those grant requirements, but for the foreseeable future, the locomotive will not be operating under its own power. Repowering a locomotive is a fairly complicated challenge. You have to pull the car body off, first of all, so that you can access the engine. You have to then pull the engine out, as well as a lot of the appurtenances that are attached to it. That includes the air compressor, all of the cooling system, the lubrication system, the exhaust system, and most likely also the main generator and all of the electrical systems coupled to it. Currently, EMD does not have any of their classic two-stroke engines that can meet Tier 4 requirements without significant exhaust modifications. In order to do that, we'd have to completely rebuild the car body with a large bulge to accommodate all of those exhaust modifications. So that right there would completely change the appearance of the locomotive. Any other kind of prime mover that we could put in the locomotive would both look and sound completely different than the EMD 645 engine that's in it currently. We'd have to completely redo the way that the engine is mounted inside the car body. We'd have to redo the air compressor connection, maybe even put a new style compressor in. So it would be a very extensive retrofit in order to make it Tier 4 compliant.
Even though an upgrade of Locomotive 2103 to EPA Tier 4 emissions standards is technically feasible, Stephen explained some of the concerns that such upgrades could potentially harm the historical integrity of the locomotive.
Although it is a possibility to repower the locomotive to Tier 4 standards, as a museum focused on historic preservation, we feel that that would not be an appropriate way to preserve the locomotive into the future. A diesel locomotive like that is very much a sum of parts. You have the car body, you have the paint job, you have the locomotive's operating history, but you also have the locomotive's power plant. That includes the diesel engine, the generator, the traction motors, the air brake system, everything that goes into making an operating locomotive. As a person experiencing a preserved locomotive, there's the tactile experience of the locomotive, there's the auditory experience, and there's the olfactory experience. A diesel locomotive like an F40 has a certain sound and a certain smell, and it just wouldn't be true to the locomotive's history or its origins for us to put a newer diesel engine in it. So for that reason, we've decided that we're not going to repower it.
Despite the fact that a restoration to operation of 2103 is on the back burner for the time being, the museum has plenty of other work that keeps volunteers busy. And the museum can always use extra assistance from anyone interested in helping out.
Our museum has several goals that can be broken down into a few categories. Since we operate over the San Diego and Arizona Railway, and we're currently the only operator out there, our goal is to eventually get more of the line restored so that we can run our trains further. We also want to build out our museum facility. Currently we have just one car shop building, one exhibit hall, and the depot. We'd like to build it out so that we have several more exhibit halls so that we can get more of our equipment under covered storage, which in the long term makes it more sustainable for us to maintain that equipment. The final piece of that, of course, is more equipment restoration. We have nearly 90 pieces of equipment in our collection. That includes locomotives, rail cars, and support equipment. Long term, we'd love to see a larger percentage of that restored and under cover, and of that, we'd love to get as much of it operating as we possibly can. In the short term, we have several projects that we're working on. We're doing a reupholstery project on our Union Pacific chair car. That's really the final piece that car needs to get fully restored. We're doing a mechanical restoration on Southern Pacific 3709. That's our low-nose GP9 locomotive. Initially, we're getting it operating, hopefully by the end of this year, and that'll segue then into a cosmetic restoration to get it backdated to its as-built appearance and repainted into its Southern Pacific colors. The two biggest challenges that any nonprofit organization has, and our museum is no exception, those are the need for manpower and finances. We are a 100% all-volunteer organization, so we rely completely on volunteers to get all of the work done. That includes operating our trains, doing all of the maintenance and restoration on the trains, facilities maintenance, building exhibits, curating our exhibits, maintaining our library. All of these things rely on volunteer labor. Some of it is the exciting work that everyone pays attention to, like operating trains or mechanical restoration, but the facilities work, the work to keep the museum clean and safe for people to visit during the week, is equally important. It's really easy to volunteer at our organization. All you need to do is become a museum member, and we'll reach out to you when you join and see what you're interested in doing and how you can help. The second part of that is finances. We rely primarily on our train ride, tickets, donations, and memberships to pay for our regular operating expenses. That generally covers the basics, but for us to really expand and take on a lot of these new projects that we want to do, we just need to step up the income that we're getting. The best way we can do that is by getting donations from people who are interested in seeing projects happen. It's very easy to donate to us. You can go on our website, psrm.org/donate, and you can either select the general fund or any number of the earmarked donations that we have available. So whether you want to see a particular locomotive or rail car restored, or if you just want to help us in general, any amount you can give, small or large, we'll take it. I'm sure many people watching this will want to know when they can come out and either see or ride behind Coaster 2103. The museum maintains several social media accounts, including Facebook and Instagram, and we always announce ahead of time when we're going to be operating Coaster 2103. There will be many opportunities throughout the rest of this year and going forward to where you can either buy a ticket to ride behind the locomotive or even get a cab ride in the locomotive. We offer cab rides on nearly all of our excursion trains. Up to 2 people at a time can ride, or if you have more who want to ride, you can swap out halfway through the ride, so up to 4 people can do cab rides on a single round trip. You can also come and visit the museum and just tour through our facilities and come out to watch the locomotive operating. We're happy to have your visit. We're happy to have your support.
And that's the story of how the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum saved Coaster Locomotive 2103. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive look into the process of what it took to preserve this locomotive and bring it to Campo. Also, a big thanks to Stephen Hager and the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum. As a reminder, you can find out even more about the museum or donate to one of their many ongoing projects by visiting the museum website, psrm.org. The museum is open on most weekends throughout the year from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., as well as some extended Saturday evenings during the summer. Excursion train schedules vary, but on most Saturdays and Sundays, trains run 3 to 4 times each day. Be sure to check out the museum website for the latest excursion information. As always, a special thanks to all my supporters on Patreon. If you have any questions or comments you'd like to share with me about this video, be sure to post those down below in the comments section. You can also let me know you enjoyed the video by hitting the like button. To receive notifications every time I post to YouTube, click on the subscribe button and select the Receive All Notifications option by clicking on the bell. There's even more train and railroad themed content on my other social media pages, and remember to stop by every Friday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific time for a brand new video right here on the YouTube channel. That's it for now. Until next time, I'm Mike Armstrong. I'll see you down the line. Thanks for watching.